Hey everyone, so in today's video we are learning how to we are learning how to adjust the camera, I guess. Alright, the camera is fully adjusted now. So we'll talk crankshafts today. On the right we have a Rally 200 crankshaft, while on the left we have a P-style crankshaft. The difference between the two is the cone on which the flywheel sits. The Rally 200 ignition works with a cam breaker, while the P200 ignition that we're going to mount today works with a CDI unit. What I've done so far off camera is I took the inner ring from the bearing, I pressed it off the old Rally 200 and I put it on the new shaft, so we're ready to go. The crankshaft on the left is a cut Ducati crankshaft, I think. The difference is that the intake time, you can see here the rotary surface is way longer on the left than it is on the right, which means for a longer duration of one full crankshaft rotation, the intake is open to suck in air and fuel mixture. You can see the difference here very well. This is the longer intake, while the shorter stock Rally 200 intake is shorter due to this little edge of metal here. So let's talk difference in flywheel really quick. The Rally 200 crankshaft is made to have this cam breaker mounted on a cone. The cam breaker sits in the middle of the stator plate, where the pickup is pointed towards the inside of the crankshaft. And then the attraction between cam breaker and pickup is magnetic. The output of this ignition to your electric is, in the Rally 200 case, 6 volts, and the flywheel, which mounts on the cone, is pretty heavy. In comparison, we have the P-style crankshaft and the P-style ignition system. It mounts on this stator plate, which supplies 12 volt to the electrical system, and it does not work with an inside cam breaker, but it's rather the flywheel that revolves around the pickup and picks up the magnetic impulse from the outside. The flywheel itself is a lot lighter than the Rally 200. I did not weigh them, I should have. But you can feel it by hand even that it is lighter. Electric current then is fed to a Ducati Cdi unit, a capacitor discharge unit, which takes care of our spark. And it's simply 3 cables coming from the stator plate. It's white, red, and green. One of the advantages of using this style of ignition is that we can advance the ignition to the point that we want it to be. I would like to have it here around 19 degrees. Now that we got to look at both cranks, it's time to put our P-style crank back in. I already split the engine. I had to take the Rally 200 crankshaft out and had everything set up ready so we can put the crankshaft back in. Again, we'll use our nice little crankshaft tool that you saw in the last video, which comes with a little adapter unit that you screw onto your crankshaft thread, and then with a set of extra fingers to hold our corner rod. It makes it very easy for you to see how the crankshaft can get pulled in without using any blunt force. I didn't really touch the gearbox, I let it the way it is. Just put my Kickstarter gear on and I could reclose the engine. And then to finish this up, I would torque down my bolts to spec. Now we're mounting the stator plate on, so what I'm doing, I'm feeding the cables through. I taped off the connectors with a piece of electrical tape, and once they're fed through, we can put our stator plate on. Both of these little marks on the stator plate, A and IT, stand for advanced 23 degrees and IT for 18 degrees ignition advanced. I put it in somewhere in the middle, and of course I would light it off properly once the engine is in the frame. I put the Woodruff key on the crankshaft before I mounted it through, and it's right nice in place, so the flywheel mounts on it properly and I can tighten it down with the right set of tools. To the cylinder, as we are staying stock 200, all I really wanted to do on this build is to remove the piston rings and replace them with a new set. So I took the piston rings off, cleaned everything up nicely, and then replaced the piston rings with a set of aftermarket Meteor rings. However, before mounting these on, I want to make sure that the piston ring gap is correct. So I put it down into the cylinder, and with a feeler gauge I measure the exact distance between the two ends of the piston ring. We're coming up to 0.27 here. I usually use bore times 0.004 because that's what Vespa piston tells you to do, and I come up with 0.26666 piston ring clearance. So what we have right now is more than sufficient. So I oil up the piston and I put my piston rings on, and I mark my spots on the piston to make it easier to locate the piston ring stops when I put it in. I did the same thing with the second piston where I checked the piston gap, and I also put a big fat arrow on it where it points toward the exhaust. I took the old piston circlips out as I'm putting new ones in, and then just simply put a new one where the old one was. As always, I make sure that it's seated properly, and I can test that by turning it around in the little nudge. As I mounted the cylinder, the whole engine together before, and we ripped it apart again to put the new crankshaft in, I had to clean it up. I also cut off the gasket on the mounting procedure beforehand. So I take off the last remaining pieces of gasket. And then I mount my cylinder studs, which I actually should have mounted after I put the piston on, but this just makes it a little bit more complicated. I always keep a piece of paper in there in case something drops down. A nice looped up piston pin bearing, and the piston with the piston pin already in place, so all I need to do is just push it in, and then I can mount my piston circlips and it's all good. But of course not before putting some paper in, because once you go fishing for a piston circlips down in your bottom end, you start getting the habit of doing this. And I'm at my gasket, because this gasket is new, I didn't really put any silicone on it, and I'm getting ready to mount the cylinder. By squeezing together the piston rings, put in position right where the piston ring stops are, the cylinder slides right on. Now, for those who've been observant, what you might recognize is that this has a yellow dot, whereas the piston gapping cylinder has an orange dot. The reason is that is my P200 cylinder that I ported in one of the older videos, and it seems to run pretty nicely. And because I'm rebuilding that engine, what I did is I just gave Matt, my buddy, this cylinder because I really liked the way it revved out. Of course, I had to gap my piston rings for this specific cylinder, but it turned out there was nothing to do as the gap was almost the same. With the cylinder mounted, all that was left was the other side of the engine, which included the brake base plate, as well as those tiny little screws to keep it in place, a little personalized message, because we don't like each other couches, and then simply mounting the rear brake. This is, as usual, a kind of fiddly affair. It's one of the only occasions where I do use a little bit of blunt force, just so I can get them on. And the last step would be to mount the clutch, which first put the little clutch washer spacer underneath. We're not using an oil drive, so I left all of that stuff out, and then mounting the clutch on the crankshaft with the Woodruff key. After that is done, I put the little basket washer on, as well as the castle nut which sits on your crankshaft. And once that is tightened down, all you need to do is just bend a little bit of that basket washer, and then we put the pressure plate in and can mount the clutch cover. And with that, the engine is together and it's ready to get back into the frame. However, before we do that, I need to prepare the rear suspension as well as get the front end ready, and this is where all the fun starts as we are attacking the disc brake. I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.